Fine. So וזהו אדון הנפלאס.
So we said that the purpose of the Torah and mitzvahs is to get to go beyond the ishtalshelus. Let's read again. Achinenu dam ma'amar.
Where are they?
On page 13.
Third line.
No, we read most of this.
We were on וזהו אדון
Okay.
הנפלאס.
Achinenu dam ma'amar. Don't niftot המחדש בדבר בכל תמיד מעשה בראשית. What does this mean when we say this in the liturgy, in Yotzer Or? The Master of Wonders, who renews every day the workings of creation. From the beginning of the Shishtalshelus, meaning the evolution of the world, at Sof Kol HaNivrim, until the final creature. Every day they're renewed from nothing to being. That's what we call the light that fills all worlds. So we go all the way from something spiritual, and it slowly thickens, as it were, until it becomes the life force of all the physical creatures. Again, you don't need to understand Seder Shtalshelus as skipping. It doesn't skip. Meaning you don't come suddenly that the creation, the physical existence of something is the result of Seder Shtalshelus. It's not. The physical existence is not from Memale. The physical existence does not come from the light that fills it. It's not from Malchus. And the Malchus is just the life force, right? It comes from the Soviet. The physical existence comes from the Soviet, from the light.
Of who? Humans or everybody?
Everyone. Physical existence is not from Memale. What's from Memale is the life force inside each creature or being, whatever it is. It's one of the, we've talked about this in the past, but it's one of the most common mistakes that people make if they don't understand these two processes. They're separate. He explains it in length in other places.
That should make you and me and everybody else very cautious about treading on ants.
Right. This is what we talked about. That the Soviv is the same. The Soviv is the same for an ant as it is for me. It's the same, there's no difference because he's shavel mashveh. And the same thing is with the neshama as it extends, as it expands in the body. The beginning of the life force is in the brain, and it comes from there, the seichel, the mind. And then it comes down to the speech. So it's the thought, speech, and action. The action. The fact that there is above and below, that there is something more spiritual and something more physical, all this is called his goodness. This is his goodness and his compassion. It's based on the verse in Ashrei, right? Even though it doesn't start Ashrei, it starts Tehillah LeDavid, right? So, in chapter 145, Hashem is good to all, and his compassion is in all his creations, let's say. Because he himself, he's the light that surrounds our worlds. He's the infinite. And the infinite light that surrounds our worlds is Shaver Mashveh Katon V'Gadol. It treats everything the same way. Everything is equal before it. And there's no Mala V'Mata, Gashmiut V'Ruchaniut. There's no difference between above and below, or between something spiritual and something physical. They're all the same. Kol Shavim Nefanav. V'zeu Adon HaNiflot. And that's what we're referring to when we say Adon HaNiflot. The master of wonders.
If it's all Soviet, then how do you get differences in species? How come ants are completely different to look at than humans?
It's the tzula already. It's the shape. We're talking about the physical matter. The physical matter existing is the soviet. The fact that here the physical matter turned into an ant, and here the physical matter turned into a human being, as far as the physical matter, it's the same physical matter. This is the shape that went into it, the form that informs.
Why doesn't that come from Mamale? Why does it come from?
That comes from Mamale. The form comes from Mamale, but not the physical existence. So it's interesting. So basically, what we're saying is, by ants it's even worse than by humans, because there the form is a derivative of the corporeal. It's a derivative of the physical. That's how we explained it in Torah Or. We learned this matter a long time ago. That by the animal life there's no separation between the physical and the spiritual. One is a derivative of the other. It's not to say that it's the same thing. It's just saying that it's tightly linked. The form of the ant is a derivative of the type of matter that went into creating the ant. There's certain matter that we don't have. I don't know exactly. I mean, you could say genetics were all the same. Genetics would be like saying the Soviet. Maybe that's why the DNA is a twisted helix. It's a double helix.
Okay, sure.
It's Soviet. You have to untwist it. You have to straighten it out in order to read it. When you're reading it, it's already mamala. It's already something like that. But the point is that the alleles from which everything is made, all the genetics are made, they're all the same. By ants, by humans, they're all the same. But the form that it takes is how the form reads the DNA. In fact, the DNA is almost identical in many cases. It's more of what the mammal reads from the DNA. There's a whole question of what defines the person's genotype. Sorry, the phenotype. Is the phenotype a derivative of the genotype, or is it not? How important is the genotype in determining the phenotype? I think it's like maybe 10%. Why?
What's the phenotype?
Phenotype is how it's expressed, how the genes are actually expressed. So they're expressed depending on how the body of the animal, how every cell interprets the DNA. You have the same DNA and the same string of letters in the DNA, and it's interpreted differently by different species. Small variations in interpretation cause tremendous variations in the phenotype. So to say the phenotype is like more determined by the mamale, by the light that fills the world. Again, it's not to say that that's what they meant. They didn't mean this. They didn't know about genetics. But the same principles hold at whatever level you're looking at things. So we said that as the neshama comes down, sorry, we read this. That's what it means, the master of wonders. Even the wonders, which are the hidden worlds, the concealed worlds, for him, even the wonders are like action. He's much, much higher than that. Why is there dveikus? Why does the soul want to cling to God? Because it understands some of the life force that is expanding from the infinite to enliven, to give life to the worlds. Because with you is the source of life. The source of life. It's not the life itself. With you is the source of life, but the life itself flows down. And this causes, when the soul recognizes this, the fact that I'm alive, and the moment that I recognize that all this life force that's in me, the fact that I feel alive, that I can move my hand, that I can think, that all these things that I do, this is all an expansion from God's source of life. So then there's a strong movement to reconnect with that. So you yearn for that. That's called ratzon.
But all these animals don't have any spirituality in the sense that human being does. So what's the difference?
Spirituality, of course we do.
When the ant recognizes Hashem?
Recognizes whatever it recognizes. For it is Hashem. For it, that's Hashem. You can't have my notion of it in the same way that my notion of Hashem is not the same as the angel's notion of Hashem. My notion of Hashem is very limited. It's limited by my mind. and maybe some of the Hasidus that I've learned. But that's as far as my understanding of Hashem is going to go. And that's nothing compared to what the angel understands. The angel sees Hashem much, much more. You might say that today, because we know so much, and if you would take all the science that you know, and everything that you know about the world, and everything you know about human relations, and everything you know about this, and all this is Hashem, so you know a tremendous amount. Maybe you know more than the angels already. Maybe we're already at the stage where we know more. But still we don't, because we're still limited by how we see things. Our senses limit our imagination. We can't really go far beyond our senses. So if you had senses that, nowadays you can put on goggles that'll show you infrared light. Yeah. And so you have a whole completely different notion of the world. You see the world through, a bee's eyes. Yeah. It sees infrared. And suddenly you see stuff that you've never seen before. So now imagine that it's not just eyesight. There's a whole slew of senses that we don't have. That we just have no concept of. We don't even know that they exist. We can't check for them because we don't know where to look even. And the angel sees this. And so imagine that there's I told you about this, about Mesmer and his whole theory. Remember we talked about that? And then in turn of the century Vienna, there was a lot of that was like the happening place in terms of Jewish thought and culture and everything. It was in the 1910s, 1920s. So, who was the Rebbe there? I forget. Yeah, I told you the Jikov. Rebbe from Jikov was there. And there was another Rebbe. I forget. And they had Hasidim who were really into mesmerism. And one of them wrote a book, Tnaya Nefesh B'Asagat HaChasidut, the requirements of the psyche for understanding or conceiving Chassidus. Like, he had this whole theory that Chassidus was really a way to capitalize on a currency that people couldn't see. And he claimed that the currency was what Mesmer was talking about. Mesmerism wasn't just the tip of the iceberg was the hypnotism. The thing was a whole theory about energy that passes between people. And he had all these theories about it. It was very, very complex. And none of it could be proven because there was no way to measure any of this. But it was a theory to try to explain human interaction. And so the whole thing was that you have to develop sensitivity to people in a way that most people are not sensitive. Like today, this is being lost entirely. We talk about what, the iPhone did. But what the iPhone has done is it's made it harder and harder for people to develop human sensitivity, social sensitivity. They don't have it anymore. Kids are growing up without it.
Walk the streets looking in their phones.
What? Right.
They walk the streets looking in their phones.
And it's not just that. Anything you
don't
want from
even have
someone.
to cross the road anymore.
Right? This is a disappearing currency. Is it going to disappear entirely? I don't know. It'll be like, there's very few people who know how to diagnose with heartbeat today. But there's a few doctors left who will still know some of the traditions. It used to be a very important thing. And who knows how many hospitalizations could be saved if all the doctors knew how to diagnose with heartbeat. And how many people would be saved because they would be sent to the hospital because they need to go. And it's a whole art form that's gone. So it wasn't useful, it was very useful. It's just that people forgot it. Like, it's not being used because there's other diagnostic tools and they're used more. So there will probably be a few people that will be left and then will know how to interact and be very good at doing this. But overall, this is going to disappear from the world, apparently.
I think the telephones are going to disappear.
The what?
Telephones are going to disappear.
No. It'll be something better, but it's going to continue the same trend. And the trend is that people are losing their social skills. That's the trend. It's very strange to watch it happen. Actually watching it happen. In the same way that there used to be like, some strength that people had to do things that today nobody cares about because you've got this bobcat that takes them, one of these little tractors that does the work of 10 people. And who cares? Who cares if there used to be a person who with his hands could take out this tree? Nobody cares. It's not interesting. There used to be loggers who could take it down, a 15-ton tree. They could even carry it in some way. They had all kinds of techniques in this. Nobody cares anymore because you don't do that anymore. You've got machines that do it. So these things, they're lost. So he was trying to, the Rebbe there, and the Hasidim, they were trying to give a scientific description. Again, it's speculative because you can't measure it, of how interactions between Hasidim and Rebbes, how they work. What is it that causes a person to be drawn to a Rebbe? Why is he connected to him? And Mesmerism fit their whole theory. So they wanted to help people develop this. So all this is saying that there's a whole spiritual world that we don't see. And the first place to look is human interactions. And there's a currency being exchanged that you don't always understand. I mean, you have a lot of understanding of it. You know how to do it with many people. Most people will look at you and say, he's a magician. How did he get someone to do this or that for him? What happened? So they don't see how the currency is being exchanged all the time. And that it's actually a very understandable process. It's not something that's like magic at all.
Yeah.
So the Malachim, they see a lot more of the world than we see. They have currencies that we can only dream of. We can't even dream of them. We don't understand how these things work. Again, science will tell you it's all these four forces. Electromagnetism is most of it, and a little bit of it is gravity, and then strong force and weak force of the nucleus. That's looking at things very narrowly, because the real stuff that's happening is stuff we don't know how to measure. We don't. There was today. Have you ever heard of "I'm Okay, You're Okay"? It's a very important book that was written in psychology in the 60s. It's called Transactional Psychology, and I don't remember the guy's name right now. His name escapes me. But he wrote about, he went to prisons to study interactions, transactions as he called them, between inmates. And he came up with a whole theory that there are 4 different types of transactions. And they have to do with how each side sees the other. So I'm okay, you're okay is the highest form of transaction. That we're both good, and we have an exchange between us. Some kind of exchange. It could be anything from good morning to helping me build a barn. Whatever it is. If you come from the position that you're okay and the other guy's okay, then the transactions are very useful and very profitable for both sides. Then there's I'm okay, you're not okay, and you're okay, I'm not okay, and I'm not okay, and you're not okay.
It says like Pirkei Avos.
Yeah, so it's like it's building on Pirkei Avos. And then he developed a whole theory based on his analysis of these different transactions. And it's a whole theory of personality, and it goes a long way. The moment you begin to, instead of testing transactions of energy between balls rolling down slopes and things like that Galileo started with, so transactional psychology was the beginning of looking at the exchanges between people and saying the energy that's being transferred, whatever it is, you call it whatever you want, whatever's being transferred between people is a currency. And you have to learn how to read it, how to understand it. And when you learn how to read it, you can understand a tremendous amount about the source of where it came from. So you can see the person's personality and what will make them happy and what won't make them happy. And he spent thousands and thousands of hours. He videotaped everything also. He was one of the first people to videotape for psychology. And his theory is phenomenal. It's really, really strong. And then it was taken, transactional psychology was taken even to higher heights in the 80s and 90s. I don't know if it's still in vogue today. But I think it's one of the most incredible ideas that someone had. Let me try to, in a certain sense, quantify, at least qualify, but even quantify what is going on in interactions between people. So the stuff that you do intuitively, there's a lot to work with. If you have the intuition, I can make you a Superman in these things. Right? If you don't have the intuition, it's hard to teach you from the beginning what to look for. But you already intuitively look. You Yaakov, you intuitively sense it.
I do.
Yeah, that's why your interactions with people are of a certain type. Yeah. But if you would read him, I can't remember his name now, or you would go to the people that he taught and developed it further, they take you to a whole new level of being able to interact with people. So anyway, this is what I mean, that we see only a small part of reality, and because of that, our understanding of Hashem is very limited. אך ימרץ לבך שוב לאחד, לפי שהוא ידבר בעצמו, אדון נפלאות ועושה פלא, ואינו בכלל השגת הנפש ודבקותה, ולכך הוא בבחינת שוב. He says, but if you recognize this, there's limitations, so many limitations on perceiving godliness, even perceiving the life force, that our psyche can't perceive because we don't have that language. We don't look at those phenomena in the world. It's not in Hasagat nefesh. It's a very important pair of words. That's what I just said before, that this Jikov Chassid called his book Tna'ei HaNefesh B'Hasagat HaChasidut. It's the conditions of the psyche needed to perceive Chassidus. Like he takes Chassidus as this is a currency. You need to perceive it. And if you don't develop the right senses, if you don't develop the right way of looking at things, then you'll never perceive what's going on. So the same thing is true in general in perceiving God. You have to develop certain powers to perceive Him. So what you said, like for instance, the story that you told me before. So the Vishnitzer, he's perceptive about understanding the interaction between people. And he says, whose fault is it? You thought it's his fault. It's really your fault. How do I see that? It's not just that everything people tell you, Ipcha Mistabra, just say the opposite. It opens up a new... That's also true. But he says right away, he feels the fact that this guy is Michal Shabbos is not because of him, it's because of you. Why in the world, why else in the world would you two be connected?
Yeah, this going to... Tomorrow I'm taking my car to be tested. Otherwise they won't let me on the road.